still remember the taste of that afternoon, a cheap metallic tang in my throat, standing in the worn auditorium of PS 134 in the Lower East Side. June was a greasy heat that year, the ceiling fans doing little but stir up the fog of sweat and fried onions drifting in through open windows. My mother sat 2 rows from the front, in her best blue blouse, clutching a disposable camera and an old purse. My Uncle Sal slouched behind her, arms crossed, mouth set. I could almost feel his stare burning through the back of my cap and gown. Principal Alvarez called my name, and I climbed the steps, tassel swaying beside my ear, hands damp under the robe's cheap polyester. The air was thick with chatter and the smell of floor polish. My time had come to deliver the speech I'd obsessed over, a letter to my future self that was supposed to be the capstone of our small, noisy classes ceremony. I looked out at the rows of familiar, weathered faces, 100 people I'd grown up with or seen around the L train station or the corner bodega. And I started, voice thin but steady. I want to tell you about dreams, I read, each syllable slow. About how people think they're too big for this block, too precious, or too impossible. But dreams are. I never finished the sentence. A sound cut through the auditorium, an almost musical snort. My cousin Angie. Her hair scraped back in a tight ponytail, rolled her eyes dramatically. Yeah, but they don't pay bills, she called out. Some kids snickered. I saw my mother's face twitch, heard the rustle as a few people shifted in their seats. I froze. My fingers tightened around the thin sheet of paper, knuckles aching. Shouts and mutters rose, a knot of laughter to my left, and Principal Alvarez hurried over, pitting a gentle hand on my back. Thank you, Manuel, she murmured, steering me away. My heart hammered in my chest, blood roaring in my ears as the applause stumbled half-heartedly and faded. Later, in the hallway, people avoided my gaze. Angie clapped me on the shoulder, smirking. Going to save the world, huh? Maybe try a job first. Uncle Sal didn't say a word, just dropped his gaze to the peeling linoleum. My mother's hug lingered, her voice soft in my ear. You did your best, she whispered, but her hands were shaking. That night it rained in sheets. I sat by my bedroom window, watching rivulets of water smudge the neon signs, the fragments of other people's lives flickering on wet brick. The city felt impossibly large, and my world impossibly small. I didn't argue with them, not then. I didn't defend my dream to become an investigative journalist, crack open secrets that mattered, do something bigger than collecting subway tokens or bagging groceries. I swallowed the humiliation whole. Let it harden into something dense inside me. The years that followed were lean and thick with compromise. I worked at a coffee shop on Delancey, typing up resumes and duplicating flyers for block parties. I covered petty neighborhood squabbles for the community rag, the kind of stories nobody outside 10 square blocks read. The criticisms from families stopped being jokes and became warnings. It's time to get serious, Manuel, Uncle Sal told me over chicken and rice one greasy Sunday. Real life doesn't care about your stories. I nodded, kept my head bowed, and let the words fester. Rage, quiet and acid, pooled beneath my ribs. Each rejection from an editor, every thanks but not a fit, every call that was never returned, was confirmation for them. To Angie, to Sal, to the roomful of people who watched me stumble at graduation. My failure was proof of their wisdom. But I didn't stop writing. Late at night, laptop balanced on my knees, I chased the scent of stories. The bartender who disappeared, the landlord evicted after fixing none of the pipes. I scribbled notes during subway rides, stole moments before shifts, research scraping my brains raw. Hope flickered in odd places. Once, when a city beat reporter took time to send a 2-line critique, Again, the day an online magazine published my piece about local ballot tampering, but the checks were thin. The city unforgiving, and people around me drifted away. At family gatherings, the talk settled around mortgages and overtime, layoffs and new appliances. My mother would glance at me, then away. Uncle Sal's patience withered until his words were little more than tight-lipped dispatches. "Delusions cost rent," he said once. "Don't ask us for help." I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. It's easy to confuse rage for silence when you know it won't change a thing. Then came a story that changed everything. I saw it unfold at the bar on Clinton Street. The headlines, the whispers, the cop's body found in the river. Foul play suspected, but quietly buried. It was the kind of riddle that scratched at my skull, even as everyone said to leave it. I couldn't. I clawed into records, spent nights at the public library flipping through ancient microfiche. I buttonholed doormen and probation officers, pressed for details. Drawn deeper by each rebuff, the city's underbelly revealed itself in flashes. A bribe here, a missing file there, a bartender with more to say than owners realized. I chased payphones in the rain, sometimes eating nothing all day but bodega coffee and cold bread. My entire life reduced to dog-eared notebooks and whispered threats. Fatigue is an animal that lives inside your bones after months of running on fear and hope. Friends drifted away. Family's patience soured into contempt. When rent came due, I pawned my phone and used the neighbor's Wi-Fi from the stairwell. Still, I dug for the whole story, certain that the answer was close, even as nights grew longer, and each scrape of coin in my pocket felt like another judgment. One morning, exhausted and stretched thin, I found what I needed. A banker's daughter, haunted and desperate, slipped me a grainy photograph proof of an off-books meeting by the river's edge. The cop, the city inspector, and a man whose name would later loop on every major network. Enough to convince even my most skeptical contact. I pitched it trembling to a magazine I'd never dared before. This time, the offer came. The first real commission, the kind that told me all those brutal nights alone had sharpened my hunger into something useful. "We need sources," the editor said. "We need risk. We need every word nailed." I gave them everything. Then they asked for more, and I gave that too. When it ran, the world shifted beneath me. I watched as bigger papers chased stories I'd unearthed, as city politicians scrambled to deny what I'd made public. My name in bold print, the byline gazed at with disbelief by neighbors on the train, family members who only read tabloids for the coupons. The first check was slow to arrive, but when it did, I cashed it and stared at the sum. The first time I'd ever held that much cash in one place. I took the subway uptown, bought myself lunch that wasn't stale pastry, and let myself feel it, the sensation of rage, for once, transformed into motion. I climbed. The magazine kept calling. Then the paper. Offers followed, the kind I could never have dreamed the day I stood on that makeshift stage, cut off and dismissed. My stories grew teeth. I uncovered corruption at the school board, payoffs to sanitation workers, the unsolved case of the missing sisters from Coney Island. Each byline was a blow to the voices that lived in my skull, repeating their old refrains. But every time my name appeared, I pictured Uncle Sal's smile flattening, Angie's arched brow. I could hear their jokes, the way neighbors in the grocery aisle never quite met my gaze. I sent my mother some money each month, a quiet gap in our conversations that never quite closed, even with all my victories. She told me she was proud, but I sensed the truth. She was relieved, more than anything else, that I wouldn't need to come home. Years passed in a blur of stories and deadlines. I missed enough birthdays for Angie to stop inviting me. I caught news of old classmates buying houses, settling into the gravity of small, sensible lives. My apartment grew larger, my kitchen full of gadgets I never used. I watched myself on the morning news from my bed, the anchor pronouncing my last name with a practiced lack of inflection. Then the summons arrived, an invitation to speak at the school's new library dedication. Principal Alvarez was retiring. Would I come back, maybe give a speech to the next batch of hopefuls, the latest crop of kids on the cusp of suspicion and hunger? The idea clung to me for days. I dreaded going as much as I craved the moment. I said yes. The subway back to the old neighborhood rattled with nerves I hadn't felt in years. When I stepped onto Delancey, it was as if I'd walked backward through time. The same cracked sidewalks, same tape on the lampposts, the air heavy with frying oil and exhaust. At the school, families clustered outside in anxious knots, watching their kids tumble past one another, bright and loud. I paused by the fence, fingertips grazing the bent wire. Inside, the hallways shrank around me. The walls, once towering, were lined with photos I barely recognized. I lingered by the trophy case, long enough for a teacher to startle next to me, her gray hair escaping its bun. "Manuel? I thought it was you." Her smile was cautious. We talked in fragments, catching up on absent friends and empty classrooms. She led me to the auditorium, the same battered seats, the same flaking paint. But now the harsh June sunlight flooding through the tall windows transformed the space, made it stark, unforgiving, honest. I was early. As the audience drifted in, I saw them. Angie and her husband, wrangling a sulky 10-year-old. Uncle Sal, older, stiffer, his gaze impassive as the day he'd called my dreams a waste. My mother, hair threaded with gray, sat between them, pride flickering on her face, mingled with the familiar thread of worry. Alvarez called